Chapter 7. Subjectivation. We are now assuming the existence of a body of truth as constituted around a primordial statement, itself the trace of a vanished event. This body is situated in the world, affected by the event, and visibly evolves there. Thus, the position taken up in relation to the existence of this body is the real, with this being the materiality of the position taken up in relation to the event. But an event is a perturbation of the world's order, since it locally disrupts the logical organization, the transcendental of this world, as the raising up of the inexistent attests. The position taken up in relation to the new body amounts then to a position with respect to the order of the world and to what must or must not exist in this world. Abstractly, it is clear that we are going to have three types of positions. We've described the first in the previous chapter: incorporation within the body, enthusiasm for what is new, and active fidelity to that having locally disrupted the laws of the world through its advent. The second is indifference, to act as though nothing has taken place, or, more exactly, to be convinced that, were the event not to have occurred, things would be basically the same. This is the classic reactive position, which quashes what is new within the soft power of conservation. The third is hostility, to consider the new body as a malevolent foreign eruption that must be destroyed. In this hatred of the new, of all that is modern and different from tradition, we recognize obscurantism. We will call these attitudes the body's subjectivations, and set down three types of subjectivation that prescribe, relative to the subjectivizable body, three types of subject: faithful, reactive, and obscure. What must be firmly grasped is that the three subjects are contemporaneous with the event and the body, even if this contemporaneity is negative. They are, as a result, new figures. The reactive subject must be acknowledged to be an invention of conservatism, however paradoxical this sounds, and the obscure subject to be itself, a creation internal to the most obtuse of traditions. Insofar as they define orientations in respect of the body, these three subjective types partake of that which is new. All three are figures of the active present, in which a hitherto unknown truth plots its course. They make up a history in which a truth wends its way with difficulty, wresting itself through its universality from the circumstances of its appearance. Take, for example, that typical instance of an events upsurge that is the October 17th revolution in Russia. The new body is obviously constituted by both the Soviet state, which is, in fact, the becoming state of the party, and the communist parties that are created all over the world from 1920 on and form the Third International. The faithful subject is the incorporation, which is to say, system of individual adhesions to this complex of national states, parties, and international organization defining the worldwide communist movement. As the militant orientation of its becoming, the faithful subject plots the present of the body as the new time of a truth. The reactive subject is everything that orientates the conservation of previous economic and political forms, capitalism and parliamentary democracy, under the conditions of existence of the new body. It is the bourgeois democratic subject, ensuring its perenniality. In one sense, the reactive subject denies the event's effectiveness, since it maintains that the previous world can and should go on as it is. It preserves an insurmountable distance between itself and the new political present. It transforms its non-presence to the new present into a false present. Yet in another sense, it accords the utmost consideration to the new body's existence. In particular, under various forms, the labor movement in England, the reforms brought in by the Popular Front, and the liberation in France, the New Deal in the United States, it will multiply the concessions made to workers, drawing up a social policy and curbing the unlimited appetites of financial and industrial powers, on condition that all this remains within the framework of the previous order, identities and differences being evaluated under the law of the same transcendental. These reforms are obviously required to make sure that the incorporation within the process of truth, the expansion of the faithful subject, and the active communist conviction stay within appropriate limits. Overall, the appearing of the previous world has to remain under the same transcendental, such that the new body is only able to deploy its maximal existence locally. This is what the orientation assigned to this body by the reactive subject comes down to, that it should stay put in its corner as far as possible. The American state has defined this line, with respect to the communist universe, as a line of containment. In this sense, the reactive subject is a new subject induced by the new body. It assures the invention of new conservative practices. By creating new ways of keeping the present of the true at a distance, it maintains the semblance of continuity. It is the present of the dissimulation of the present. The obscure subject wants the death of the new body, the perenniality of the transcendental at the price of imminent reforms is not enough for it. This is what defined the fascist line in the first half of the 20th century in Europe. What makes this line revolutionary is that, in order to have done with the presence of the new present, it is necessary to render present the integral destruction of the body of truth, which means liquidating the faithful subject in all its forms, since the faithful subject is the orientation of this body. The problem of the obscure subject is that this purely counter-revolutionary dimension of its revolution lacks sufficient power to rally the destructive forces it needs. It must additionally come up with a completely fictitious body that rivals the body of truth, even while, however, rejecting and denying, rather than ratifying, the event in which its rival originates. For this, the body that fascism claims to represent has to be of the order not of an event, but of a substance, a race, a culture, a nation, or a god. Accordingly, the obscure subject will first impose the lethal sovereignty of a fictitious body borrowed from the tradition, and then destroy the new present by a paradoxical present, which is that of eternal substance. The obscure subject makes a present of that which, by its account, has always been there, but which events have deformed and dissimulated. This is the real meaning of the 1000-year Reich promised by Hitler. Once the present of revolutions, especially the communist present, was destroyed, the present of Aryan or German eternity would prevail. To the mobile body of the truth process, the obscure subject opposes the fixed past present of national, racial, or religious substance, but this promise is untenable. Unlike the body of truth, unfurling that which results from the real of the event, the body of the obscure subject is fictitious, and as such only derives its apparent present from the destruction of its rival. Aryan eternity only existed as long as did the extermination of the Jews, which explains why the Nazis applied themselves to this right up to the last second of their existence. The Reich existed only as long as it took to lose the war, which explains the suicidal refusal of any negotiation, even after the invasion of Germany. The obscure subject derives all its present from the fierce resistance of the body of truth. It is the making present, under the blazon of death, of the faithful subject's tenacity. The shifting configuration of these three subjective types defines a political, artistic, scientific, or amorous historical sequence. One sees, for example, the reactive subject ally itself, where the obscure subject against the faithful subject in Germany The classic reactionary forces handing over to Hitler the lead against the communists, the faithful subject ally itself, with the reactive subject against the obscure subject, the alliance of the U.S. and the USSR against the Nazis, and even the temptation in truth, always suicidal, of an alliance between the faithful and obscure subjects, the 1939 Germano-Soviet Pact. This is because the historical present, contrary to what the Hegelian dialectic and dogmatic Marxism affirm, does not coincide with the body of truth's present. Indeed, history is always the imbrication of the three subjective types, combining, as regards the body of truth, this body's three orientations. Merleau-Ponty, noting the apparent dissimulation of a truth's becoming in its present itself, was to declare that history never confesses. 3. The truth is that it is only incomprehensible, for whosoever refuses to decipher the stigmata of the present. It is necessary to first attend, patiently, to events and the ensuing constructions of truths, then to accept that reaction and its extreme forms are also innovations, contemporaneous with the post-evental present, signaled by the subjectivist able body, and finally, to hold that the confused appearance of history is due to the impossibility of calculating what the result of the subjective orientations mixture will be. For the true can only be known to the extent that, in the course of the various episodes pitting it against reactive or obscure innovations, it will have attained the eternity of which it is capable. As a result, it will only be known which is what is called knowing, as detached from its present and hence from the confused world having witnessed its birth. Only when it is set out in another world, in order to be used for the purposes of new incorporations, will its resurrection deliver it up to us as such. A truth is only universal in the future perfect of the corporeal process that caused it to appear. One shouldn't assume that politics, and it alone, is paradigmatic as concerns truth's eventual becoming, and the subject forms accompanying this. I would like to show this here by speaking of love. We have seen that the body of love is a particular form of experimenting, with the world enacted from the point of view of the two. The individuals summoned to the incorporation are two to act as the bearers of this two, such that they constitute a minimal collectivity. This in no way prevents the history of a love being just as confused an entanglement as the history of an emancipatory politics, or true politics, the history of a new regime of art, or the implementation of a new scientific theory. The subjective types are, in particular, easily recognizable. Naturally, the faithful subject is everything that orientates love towards the effective power of the two it institutes. It is the incorporation itself, the fact that ever more fragments of the world, of an ever greater intensity, appear before the two, instead of being folded up within narcissistic satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Let us note in passing that love is like an atom of universality, not transcultural universality, political internationalism, the scientific community, and so on, but trans-individual universality, passing from one to two and experimenting with the two to infinity. Since every element of the world is capable of being treated by a body of love, love is the first degree of the individual's passage to an immediate, beyond hearer himself. It is the elementary form of singularity's sublimation in universality. This is why, as we know, humanity has, since time immemorial, been fascinated by love and love stories. What is spelled out within love is that living what is called living comes down, not to individual interests, but to the manner in which the world is exposed to us, however limited this us may be and however hazardous may prove its uncertain construction, not from what is, but from what befalls us. The reactive subject in love precisely refuses to assume this risk without solid guarantees. It demands, in a certain sense, that the lover can say life goes on just as it was, with love being, as a result, not a radical event, but a sort of inner complement, necessary for a satisfying existence. To this end, the body of love is filtered by all sorts of conservative precautions, taking the general form of a contract. I need to know whether I derive more advantages than disadvantages from life in a couple, and also whether my individual advantages are equivalent to those my partner derives from the situation. We can name conjugality, this juridically cautious vision attempting to circumscribe as narrowly as possible the undomesticated and unequal share presupposed by love's very origin, an incalculable encounter that destines life to the blind experimentation of its consequences. Little by little, the reactive subject metamorphoses love into that which is both its objective substratum and its permanent enemy, the family. This subject is what guarantees that love can and must assure the transition from one family to another. Now, the family occupies exactly the same position in relation to love as the state does in relation to politics. In this sense, reactive conjugality is strictly equivalent to the democracy that today one is trying to impose upon the whole world, including by the use of arms. As we know, this democracy is politics without politics, since its one and only purpose is to make sure that capitalist parliamentarianism, that is, the dominant form of the modern state, perseveres without serious upheavals. In this sense, conjugality is love without love. It seeks to make sure that the nuclear family perseveres. The obscure subject in love takes up a revolutionary position, just as it does in politics. In no way is it satisfied with conjugality. It proclaims that far from being the product of chance, love is already written in the stars, or in any case, in a necessity overwhelmingly vaster than its apparent contingency. It is set on tracking down and destroying every trace of this contingency, in which it sees only a lethal risk, that of the others leaving or being unfaithful. To combat love's being without any sort of guarantee other than its very process, it has to propose a fiction to it as well, with this fiction being that of the one. For the obscure subject, love in no way entails the infinity of the world, coming before the two that an event has rendered topical. It is the fusional assumption of the predestined one. In this deadly vision, as shown by the Wagnerian myth of Tristan and Isolde, the most common operator of destruction is jealousy. The jealous lover, indeed, leaves love no share of freedom or peregrination. Any deviation in respect of the supposed one is the point of departure of a betrayal. Everything that evokes contingency is an injury inflicted upon the supposed one. Everything that does not repeat the fusional pact, everything that affirms the two, is suspect. Jealousy is the experimentation of this suspicion and the subjective spur of amorous obscurantism. Just like fascism in what concerns the life of a society, jealousy transforms the life of a couple into an ongoing saga of policing. And just like fascism, it prefers annihilation to the breakdown of the one. Those, like Proust, who think that jealousy is the essence of love are similar to nationalist extremists who think that the essence of the community is the archetypal one of its empirical or racial existence. The only way they can sustain their vision in the long run is by torture, both of themselves and others, and finally by murder, whether real or symbolic. But all real love struggles, as does true politics, to save the faithful subject who leaves open the risk of the two from being excessively eaten away at or undone by. The actions, always contemporaneous with the body it orientates, of the reactive and obscure subjects. Between the indistinct family and deadly jealousy, love must take up the wager of its moving eternity. Alain Badiou, Second Manifesto for Philosophy.